Here we go. Our hangout is live on the internet. Is your phone on Do Not Disturb?
My phone's all the way over there. And yes, it's on Do Not Disturb.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you get this right with the mic. Yeah. It's that sweet gas station coffee sound. See the hollow rattle of the plastic lid? That's the sign of quality.
Yep, that's how you know you got a remember when Domino's did that ad campaign where they were like, people really make it. You think it's trash made by machines, but it's not. Actual humans make it. Like that was something to brag about.
Yeah. That really changed my whole outlook. Oh, wow. All right. We're kicking off hot here with John Oakes asking, have either of you seen Ian McShane's greatest cinematic achievement, Hot Rod? I have.
Have you?
Sadly. Do you remember that Hot Rod was a movie with like Andy Samberg, I want to say? Like it was he was kind of like a of the moment kind of guy. And
wait, what are you trying to say?
That moment is past.
Really? Is he on Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Isn't it like a runaway hit for FX or Fox or whatever station it's on?
What I mean is like it was the attempt to take him from being a funny TV guy to being a funny movie star, like a Will Ferrell kind of guy. And it was not a very good movie. But Ian McShane was definitely in it. He plays like, like the fed up dad or something in it. And I remember watching it and being like, this is a misuse of this man's talents, a criminal misuse.
I do remember that movie now that you bring it up. I think it's one of those movies that like when you have HBO, it's just on a lot. So yeah. I've probably seen chunks of it, but not necessarily like in chronological order. And I've certainly never seen all of it before. There is a phenomenon, is there not, of actors who are awesome in HBO shows then kind of going on to do a bunch of sort of like lackluster stuff, which is like kind of the I assume it's like it's the bane of being a working actor, right? Like being
sometimes famous, you just got to take a role.
Yeah, being famous, but not being like quite to the level, like not being Arnold Schwarzenegger, not being, The Rock. Like if you get a good opportunity,
a huge pile of scripts.
Well, you probably are, but at the same time, like if you get a good opportunity, you got to kind of take it. Like Dominic West, who plays Jimmy McNulty on The Wire and is really good in The Wire. And then you see him in a bunch of these other movies, and it's just like, I don't know, man. It's not the same. Like he's in that movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg.
Oh yeah,
he's like
That's a weird movie.
He's like a British rock star or producer or something.
No, he's a rock star. Yeah,
there's a lot of people like that.
Well, and you know what? Also, you see Ian McShane show up in Game of Thrones for like 15 minutes of one. Remember, he is like the preacher out in the countryside, and they're building like a church or something, and he's got like this commune of people, and he has taken in the Hound and nursed him back to health. And the Hound and he's trying to like tell him like, hey, I used to be like a rogue like you, but you could be a better person. And the Hound's like, basically, no, the world doesn't work that way. And then Ian McShane and his entire flock get murdered. And the Hound's like, yeah, see, I knew it. Now I have to go murder these people who murdered you. And he's really good in that too, But it's like you see him, you're so happy to see him in an HBO show, and he's dead within like 15 minutes. You're like, damn it.
That strikes me as a missed opportunity. Like Ian McShane could have had a larger role in Game of Thrones and probably would have been awesome at it.
Maybe they were just doing the Game of Thrones thing where they're like, all right, we're going to get you to fall in love and then immediately break your heart.
He's in American Gods right now.
Okay. I have not seen that. Have you seen that?
I have not. I think it has somewhat mixed reviews. He also is in that weird movie Pottersville that I talked about on a recent live chat where Michael Shannon is Bigfoot. Remember that? It's kind of like a Christmas movie. You didn't.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. All right.
Ian McShane is also in that, which I had totally forgotten, but he totally is in that.
Michael Shannon is Bigfoot in that?
Well, he plays a guy who dresses up as Bigfoot.
Okay. Oh, right.
And then, causes a hysteria in his small town. Ian McShane also in Ray Donovan and American Horror Story. Oh, And he was also in Pillars of the Earth. I remember I tried to watch that for like a hot minute. I feel like Pillars of the Earth was like one of those shows where they tried to make a big like gold standard drama on stars or something like that.
That's their first warning sign right there.
And it's like, no, this is going to be our serious show. This is like our big prestige drama. It's going to put stars on the map for like peak TV. And then no, that doesn't happen.
Andrew Millington says, firstly, Ben, thanks for the dude wipe usage on the last CME proper. That's right. That's the dude wipe for anybody when you take a shot of whiskey and then you do one of those. Second, have you dudes caught up on the second season of Crime Town? I listened to almost all of the second season of Crime Town. Have you been listening to that one?
No.
What about Detroit?
I listened to like 4 episodes of it.
It's wild. It goes in some wild directions.
Yeah.
It's a lot more, I don't want to say disjointed, but kind of all over the place than the first season was.
Yeah.
And early on, that was a little bit jarring. And then you start to see how some of the threads are connected. And then towards the end, it just spends a lot of time talking about the strange reign of Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. But yeah, it's good. It's a good podcast. It's just so tightly put together. It's like less than 30 minutes, and each episode really feels like a journey.
Crime Town is one of the best produced podcasts, just in terms of like putting together a story and making it feel immersive and, like a fully realized storytelling thing. I was a little bit, obviously Detroit is crazy, and there's going to be a rich fountain of material to work from in Detroit. I was a little underwhelmed with it as a milieu, as a subject matter.
A milieu
for Crime Town.
We're like 9 minminutes into the live chat, and Chad has already used the word milieu.
That's what you get when you show up for the live chat.
I guess so.
Of a Wednesday morning. Because one of the cool things about season 1 of Crime Town was that it's about Providence, where like if you're from Montana, like I am, fucking know anything about Providence. Like it's just like what it seems like a really super nondescript town, and then you start listening to Crime Town, and it's like, holy shit, Providence is really fucked up. Whereas Detroit is like, yeah, man, Detroit is really fucked up.
You feel like it was low-hanging fruit?
A little bit of low-hanging fruit. It also, and I realized that this is just a personal problem of mine. It hurt me that they put it on Spotify. Like, I've never been able to get Spotify to work right on my phone.
Really?
Yeah. So like, I don't even fucks with Spotify anymore, just because it just does not work on my phone.
Huh.
So.
Did you make it far enough to hear about Young Boys Incorporated? Because that was some of my favorite shit when it's talking about these dudes who were like teenage drug lords, and the way they got their name, YBI, was because like people would be like, hey, like see some heroin addict on the nod and be like, hey, where'd you get that good dope? And be like, man, them young boys on the corner. And then they became Young Boys Incorporated.
I don't think I made it that far. I think the last episode I listened to was the one where the former drug lord and his son get in an argument about what conspiracy is at the end of it, which is amazing.
Great. Yeah.
Like that's an amazing moment.
Yeah, where he was like, I wasn't involved in no conspiracy. And the son's like, you were involved in the conspiracy every day of my life as a child. Like when all those people were coming over to the house, it was to discuss like your drug business, right? And he was like, yeah, but when no conspiracy. He's like, that's what a conspiracy is.
Yeah.
He's like, well, that's what the white people called it. Matthew Thomas says, not MMA related, but whatever. Hey man, it's the live chat. It's the goddamn live chat.
You don't think you don't think we don't get complaints all day in the Patreon messages about how we don't talk enough MMA in the live chat? Because we do. We get those complaints.
As someone who writes and edits for a living, I wanted your hot takes on the Oxford comma. Yay or nay? Superfluous or clarifying? What's your preference, gents? Don't hold back or fetter the discourse. I like the Oxford comma. I'm all for it.
I've come around to it. I come out of a journalism background. My undergraduate degree is in journalism, where they'll take you out behind the shed and whip you with reeds if you use an Oxford comma. So for a long time in my life, I viewed it as unnecessary and like it's a sign that you're putting on airs, basically.
Putting on airs?
Oxford comma in there, like
the one extra comma is where it gets like pretentious.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Salinger, whatever.
It's clarifying. It's for the sake of clarity.
Now that I have been more immersed in a life of literature, one thing that the people who edited all my books had to do is go back through and put Oxford commas in there. And like I've come to see its positive uses.
He's a guy. I mean, one thing, all the people who edited all my books,
both of them.
Who's putting on airs.
Yeah. Well, I'm using the Oxford comma now. So
the Great Dane asks, how's the coffee? Rainforest-ish. You know it, Great Dane. Okay, Colleen says, howdy. Jorge Masvidal, the greatest welterweight that almost was? Almost was what? Are we saying he almost was champion?
I'm gonna have to go to Jorge Masvidal's record here.
Yeah, I mean, tell me Jorge Masvidal has something fun going on Wikipedia photo.
Jorge Masvidal, no Wikipedia photo.
Have you seen how he's been showing up? How he's been looking in London?
I just saw the stare down picture where Masvidal is rocking the long hair and like looks like he's got like a silk shirt on, maybe like a button-up silk shirt, and Darren Till is making a face like he just woke up and realized he was at the stare down.
I got to show you this because this came across in our Slack channel that John Morgan, he's on the ground in London, and he sent us a picture of Jorge Masvidal looking pretty fucking sweet. Yeah, man, now can't quite find it, but here it is. Look at this one right here.
Oh yeah, that's really something.
We can show you on the live.
You're gonna put the MMA Junkie Slack channel right up there on the live chat.
You can trust the live chatters.
Wow, all right. Yes.
But yeah, Jorge Masvidal right now in this picture, looking like the cover of a romance novel, kind of got the long flowing locks, the really sculpted beard. Also, it seems like he has really entered a kind of like don't give a fuck phase in his career.
Well, Darren Till is right in that quote about Jorge Masvidal, that Jorge Masvidal knows who he is. He does. He absolutely knows who he is. And who he is like a fun welterweight that we're always going to watch. Yeah. And that's fine. Like that's better than 99.9% of all of the people who ever put on MMA gloves. So,
and he's not trying to be anything else. Like he's just trying to show up, beat somebody's ass, get his check, and go home.
And I have a feeling that Jorge Masvidal would absolutely tell you that if you asked him.
How old is Jorge Masvidal?
34. Here, I'm trying to get to the bottom of whether or not he was the greatest welterweight who almost was, even though I'm not totally sure what that means. He lost to Gilbert Melendez in a fight for the Strikeforce lightweight title in December of 2011. And that, you got to say, that's kind of like, that's the top of the mountain for Jorge Masvidal, sort of, at this point. Like, he has a very respectable, he's 32-13 overall, very respectable run through Strikeforce, Bellator, and the UFC, not to mention World Victory Road. So there you go. And Bodog. He's one of those guys who's kind of fought everywhere.
Yeah.
But he's also one of these guys that like wins a couple fights, and then when he gets a shot against someone of a slightly higher caliber, just seems like he doesn't get it done. His UFC losses are to Rustam Habilov, Ali Quinta, Benson Henderson, Lorenz Larkin, Damian Maia, and Stephen Thompson. So I don't know that he almost was. I think he is what he is. And then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And like this Darren Till matchup, which I think we talked about this on the CME a little bit, it's like it's kind of a big matchup for Jorge Masvidal, because if you beat Darren Till, like you're kind of in the conversation.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, but then it feels like the UFC has him pegged as this is a fight night guy at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, it also feels like he has like a modicum of job security also.
Yeah.
Like Masvidal, even though I think we joked on Monday that he has Scotty Coates' number in his phone, those guys have done business in the past. Like, he seems like the kind of dude that the UFC will just keep around.
Yeah.
Because he delivers what we know he delivers.
Sunny Weathers says, my first question, on the regular podcast, what do you guys do between rounds? Actual breaks or just cuts to add music? Well, you can watch the live stream of the podcast and find out what we do.
Then you would know.
Some bathroom breaks. Sometimes we'll get up to get a water or something.
Refresh our coffee. Sometimes we talk to the folks on the live stream.
Sometimes we do that.
Get a little bit of behind the scenes action.
Sometimes we just continue whatever shit we were talking about, whoever we were talking it about on the actual like just carries over after the end of the round at times.
I mean, we are on a pretty tight window.
That's right.
We can't just sit here and bullshit with each other all day.
No.
Because we got to go pick up our kids and whatnot.
You got to be at the bus stop and then the school bus rolls
So
out.
it's got to be a fairly prompt, fairly brisk experience. But at the same time, there's some outtakes. There's outtakes. If you watch the live stream of the Monday podcast, you'll see the outtakes, and they are worth it. They are worth the money.
Rouge Islam definitely has been watching the live stream because he says, how did Sir Nigel exit the CME recording room on Monday, by which he means Chad's dining room table, basically, without being seen on camera? Is he a phantom? Perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps he is.
A phantom.
Yeah. This is the part we're going to get like several years into the podcast before we reveal that Sir Nigel is just a figment of everybody's imagination. We're all having the same simultaneous hallucination.
Did you guys notice that when Sir Nigel walked in front of a mirror, he had no reflection on the last episode of the Co-Main Event podcast?
This is like when somebody told me that Snuffleupagus is just Big Bird's imaginary friend, that nobody else ever interacts with Snuffleupagus, really.
Hard to believe that's true.
Yeah, I didn't really go back and fact check this. And it's, now that I'm saying it, it sounds like the kind of conversation that, you know, people might have been smoking that dope a little bit to even bring this up. It sounds like somebody being like, did you know? But you know how Big Bird is like, he's like a child, basically. Like he's supposed to be like a child.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that Snuffleupagus is his imaginary friend.
Well, I'm going to have to pay attention now because we do watch some Sesame Street here at the house.
You know what? The other day, this is a weird aside, but God damn it, it's the live chat. I was listening to NPR and they were talking about, like, somebody had written this book about all of the things like the Sesame Street creators had come up with, like stuff that they had learned about how to communicate with children. And it was specifically about death. And they played the clip from when Mr. Hooper died.
Oh.
And I did not really remember this at the time, but like, you know, the actor who played Mr. Hooper died, and the show decided like, all right, we'll use it as, instead of just like, you know, pretending nothing happened, we'll use it as an opportunity to address the topic of death with kids. And Big Bird shows up and he has painted a picture of Mr. Hooper. And like, he shows up at Mr. Hooper's store and they're like, you know, Big Bird, don't you remember, like, we told you that Mr. Hooper died? And Big Bird was like, oh yeah. Well, okay, I'll give it to him when he comes back. And you're like I listened to that clip in the car in the morning, like driving to get a coffee in the morning. I teared up. That really hit you.
Snuffleupagus is a big favorite of my youngest son, so he'll be super broken up to learn that it's just a figment of Big Bird's imagination.
I don't know if now's the time to tell him.
We'll wait a few years. We'll wait until his communicative powers evolve beyond laughing and going, ha, 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 funny, Snuffy, every time Snuffleupagus shows up on the camera.
John says, more of a comment than a question. If Chad needs to slap one of those sweet CME stickers on that laptop to represent.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I should probably do that.
Nice.
I should probably do that.
Aaron Dane says, if your kids were old enough and you had the money and clout to do it, would you bribe top colleges to get your kids guaranteed in? Okay. Here's the thing about this college admissions bribery scandal.
The internet is afire.
On one hand, it's a weird moment, I feel, because it's like, on the one hand, we all knew this was happening. We just thought it was happening in a different way. You're supposed to pay the schools. Like, you're not supposed to pay like these other people to turn around and like carry out this elaborate fraud. Especially when I was growing up in the LA area, everybody knew that if you went to USC, it was because your parents were rich and you weren't smart enough to get into UCLA.
Okay.
Like UCLA, you actually had to have good grades and good SAT scores. And USC, your parents just had to have some damn money. And everybody knew that. And it was just kind of like a given. And that's like why UCLA was in the crosstown sports rivalry, the choice of the people. USC, the choice of the elites.
Okay.
Everybody knew that. And everybody kind of knows that about like a bunch of, it's like, you know, when you hear like, oh, Donald Trump's kids went to like, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm sure it's because they were such great students. Everybody knows that. And yet like, we just kind of like, we've gotten so used to it. And then this thing pops up and everybody's like, oh my God, you mean that maybe the American college system was not a meritocracy after all? And it's like, oh yeah, we had just all kind of agreed to look the other way on that.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like one of these things where if you grow up in Montana, for the most part, you feel super disconnected from all that stuff. Like there essentially is no like Ivy League college rat race in Montana. Like some people go to Harvard or Yale or Brown or Georgetown or whatever every year, and that's fine. But like, I grew up knowing that if I went to college, I was going to go to the University of Montana, and that was it. Number one, because my parents didn't have any money, and that was all they could afford. And back in those days, the University of Montana was obscenely cheap if you were an in-state resident.
Even San Diego State, when I went, was obscenely cheap. If you were a California resident,
they would basically take anybody. And also, like, I was not the world's most committed high school student. I had some other
hard to believe.
Had some other stuff happening at that time that I was more interested in than, say, academics. So it's not like I was hanging on. I don't think I ever took the SAT. Like, you don't, because you didn't have to take it to get into UM. You just take the ACT. That's a thing, right? You take that, and like, it doesn't come back that you are insanely stupid, and they will let you in. So like, that's all I did.
Stupid.
And so like all this hemming and hawing about the Ivy League and whatnot, like, I understand the perpetuation of like essentially a caste system and like power structures, and how these super rich and famous people bribing high-level universities to let their kids in just sort of like perpetuates who has the power and who has the money, and rich people stay rich and poor people stay poor. And that sucks for sure. But it also feels super disconnected from the world that I know. So like, I support cleaning it up, but it's also, I'm not super fired up about it. I admit that I have outrage fatigue.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah. If you are confronted with social media every day, like we are, unfortunately, and even though I've been taking a lot of steps to mitigate that in my life and not just be on social media all the time, it really is like from one minute to the next, everybody is outraged about something.
Yes.
And eventually I just get to the point where it's like, I don't have that much outrage left in my body.
Yeah, that's true.
And so the college admissions thing is kind of like one where I'm like, okay, we're going to get super fired up about this, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing I really care about with the college admissions thing is like, let's all just make sure we know what this stuff means. That if you graduated from USC, it's not necessarily because you were so smart and that, you had earned some kind of place in the hierarchy of American society. Not really. Like, I support us all kind of taking the wool off of our eyes on this shit, not just on the actual, like, pay somebody else to take the SATs for you and then lie to your kid so they don't want the kid in on the bribery. But also, just in general, the idea that like, oh, these people went to these schools, it must mean they're smart.
One other addendum about weird wrinkles of growing up in a crazy backwater like Montana is that when you're in college, like undergrad, if you meet a kid who's like clearly rich and from New Hampshire and is like wearing a blazer at the bars, which is not something that we would ever do here, you meet that person and you start talking to them like, yeah, I'm studying forest management or whatever. As a native Montanan, the thing that immediately flashes in your head is, what's wrong with this guy? Like, why is he here? Why is this guy not at Vassar?
Yeah.
Or something? Like, and then so it's like this waiting game for you to figure out like, oh, I see. He's a drug addict. That's why he couldn't get into Vassar. That's why his parents sent him out here.
See, I didn't even really meet too many of those people.
No, they're really rare. It's like when you meet one, you're like, oh, what's wrong with this guy?
I didn't meet too many of those people until in the grad program at Montana, it became clear in our MFA program, because not a whole lot of wealthy elites went to San Diego State University. It was very much a college of the people. The wealthy elites went to USD. Go Aztecs. But then come into Montana and like you'd meet some of the people in the grad program and and then, I remember talking every once in a while when we'd be gripped by the fear of, oh God, what am I going to do once I get an MFA? It's not like that lines you up for a job. And some of the people were like, oh, well, I'm just going to apply to this PhD program in English. And you're like, wait a minute, you're just going to go to colleges your whole life, aren't you? Until they eventually just hire you as a professor somewhere, because you don't have to get a job because you come from so much money that none of this is ever going to matter. Like, you're just kind of, this is something you're doing, so you can say to your parents, like, I'm doing something. I'm not just being a bum, and they'll keep paying the checks.
I guess that's out there.
But no, I would, if I had the money, no, I would not bribe to get my kid into the colleges because I don't care.
Is there a question on there about Conor McGregor's use of street dundasso? Because I'm ready to talk about it.
I mean, do you really need a question for that? We can just talk about it. Goes in for the handshake.
Yeah, street Dundasso. No holds barred.
I mean, I guess
you can picture it in your mind, right?
You
Conor
can
McGregor pretending to go in for the handshake and then slapping the phone out of the guy's hand.
And the guy falling for it.
Well, yeah, Conor McGregor wants to shake that guy's hand. Everyone would fall for that.
Now, all right, as far as like how this fits into the larger McGregor context.
The McGregor cinematic universe?
Yeah, how this fits into the McGregor cinematic universe. It's definitely not the worst thing he's done by far. No. And yet it also does feel like, okay, I'm getting a sense of what's happening with you now.
He's on a trajectory.
Yes.
I would say.
Yeah. I wrote about it and it reminded me of the time. And I remember bringing in this newspaper article like to a class in school because it was like a thing where you're supposed to bring in like a current events thing to write about. And I brought in a newspaper article about Mike Tyson getting into a fight with Mitch Blood Green outside an all-night tuxedo rental shop in Harlem and injuring his hand. So that
all-night tuxedo rental shop.
He was supposed to start training camp for like a Frank Bruno fight like the next day. He's supposed to go up to the Catskills with Gus D'Amato and start his training camp the next day. So that night, he was out enjoying the last bit of freedom. He was picking up, I believe it was like a white leather jacket that he had custom made. And like the custom made aspect of it was them putting the words on the back that said, "Don't believe the hype," or something like that. Had to go pick that up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He'd been out all night. And then he gets into, like, he starts arguing with Mitch Blood Green, who he had fought and beat at that point, and then sucker punches him in the nose. And then everybody was worried, like, oh, did Tyson injure his hand sucker punching this guy out on the street? Like, is he still going to be able to defend the title? And it was like, oh, yeah, does start to seem like Conor McGregor is on a similar trajectory, especially with swirling rumors that there might also be, as there was with Tyson, a sexual assault problem that he might have to deal with.
There are those swirling rumors.
That rumor's not going away.
Someone wrote a text about it in Comic Sans that appeared on the internet. No, it was a WhatsApp message that I saw on the internet. I haven't heard anything else about it in addition to that. But it does feel like Conor McGregor is going to kind of keep fucking around in these streets or the loading dock of a high-profile sports arena.
Or the Fontainebleau.
Yeah. Until something worse happens. Like until he is either injured or something worse or has to spend some time in actual jail. But it does feel like that's the path that we're on, despite the fact that it's just sort of like one piece of trifling bullshit after another with Conor McGregor. Someone did come onto the Patreon to say that the hottest nightclub in South Beach is at the Fontainebleau.
Okay.
So that's probably why Conor McGregor was there, which it was another one of those moments for me where I was like, I'm glad we know that now. And for me, the knowledge that the hottest nightclub in South Beach is in the Fontainebleau is instructive only so I could avoid the place like the plague. Like,
I don't think you'd enjoy it.
I don't think I would either. I don't think I've ever been to a place described as a hot nightclub and came away from it being like, you know what? I had a really good time.
I don't think they have a happy hour there.
No.
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. What are the apps like? How are the apps?
It's like in Queens when I lived there, there would be these like clubs, and it would have the sign on the door it would say like 21 and up, except for men, 25 and up for men, or something. You know, and it was like, okay, let's see what you're doing. I can't say I don't understand it. I can't say I don't know where it's coming from, but I know what's going on, and I also know I probably would not enjoy it. And we, out of curiosity, once walked in off the street there once. It was like 9:30 at night on a Saturday, and like me and my wife and Sir Nigel, we walked in off the street just to be like, all right, let's see what's going on. And a guy was leaning up against the bar reading a newspaper, a guy who worked there, and he looked up like, what the hell what is anyone doing here at 9:30 at night? We don't really get going for another 3 hours.
You guys here for the Blue Plate special? Get yourself a nice piece of fish, you old bastards.
It was like we just reminded him that he had left the door unlocked. And he's like, oh, I need to just rectify that immediately.
And weirdly enough, he didn't card Sir Nigel, which makes us wonder, is he just a figment of our imagination?
Was he ever there? Was he ever there?
All right, let's talk about this particular incident with Conor McGregor, though, because on one hand, Conor McGregor has made this life for himself. correct?
He's going to live it. We're going to roll it until the wheels fall off.
In fact, it would seem that Conor McGregor would accept no other kind of life. He has made this sort of like niche celebrity for himself. He's going to go out there and be at the hottest nightclub in South Beach until 5 o'clock in the morning. And I understand that, like, because he has made that life for himself, there are certain expectations that come along with it, with his fame. And so it's not good that he smashed this guy's cell phone when he took a picture of him. I think that we all as human beings can understand how that might be annoying, though. A dude trying to take your picture at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Monday when all you're trying to do is get out of the hottest nightclub in South Beach and either go to sleep or go do something else.
Yeah,
probably
going to do something
else.
Who knows
what. And so it's like, yeah, man, it's bad that Conor McGregor did that. And I'm also kind of like, but I kind of empathize a little bit with that position, with like not wanting someone to take your picture at 5 o'clock in the morning, despite the fact that I know all of the counter arguments.
Yeah, well, I also have to wonder, like you say, Conor McGregor is living this life. And the nature of the celebrity and the superstardom that he has created for himself, isn't this just perfectly on brand with that? Like, this is like what people kind of want. Like, the guy even who got his phone smashed, he must have been, like, afterwards, it's not like he could have gone to somebody and be like, well, you'll never believe what happened. Like, it was just so jarring and unexpected. Like, yeah, no, it makes sense that you would try to take a picture of Conor McGregor at 5 a.m. outside a club. He would get mad. He would freak out and he would smash your phone. Like, if you've been following this guy and all the stuff that's been going on in his career, that's not a completely unforeseeable turn of events. And it kind of feels like, I don't even know if, like, it feels like this is kind of what we want out of him, whether we are willing to admit it or not. Like, we kind of want Conor McGregor to be wilding out in these streets. If he's not going to be fighting, if he's not actually going to step up and sign a contract, then a part of us wants the Conor McGregor circus to be ongoing.
I guess that's a point that seems arguable, at least. And like I said on the special retort that we published on Tuesday, one of the things that lets you know that this is super on brand for Conor McGregor is that he used a picture from the perp walk on his own Instagram feed as part of his post that was essentially like kind of an apology. Like, I'm still learning.
Kind of an apology, but definitely not an apology.
Right, yeah, a non-apology apology. It was like, I'm still learning patience as a virtue. Also, here's a picture of me wearing a T-shirt made by my own clothing company, walking out of a jail in South Beach, which, as Conor McGregor, I thought was the perfect illustration for this social media post.
Yeah. Yeah. Studying Weather says Ian McShane also made a good villain on a few episodes of Magnum P.I. and Miami Vice. Oh, shit, I got to see those.
The originals or the reboots? Because both those
I hope it's the originals.
Were redone.
Oh,
both those were rebooted.
Sad.
Rebooting everything. Rebooting the Lost Boys here pretty soon.
What?
I know, right?
What?
Why would you mess with perfection, man?
At least tell me that the dude who, like, the big muscular dude playing the saxophone at the, like, outdoor concert is going to be there. Robert Skanes says, did Ben's team advance in the playoffs? Okay.
Speaking of low-hanging fruit.
Here's what happened. What had happened was we went out there on Monday night. We played, Chad, Hockey Wolf, one of the top teams in the league. They had a first-round bye. We had to win our game to advance to the semis. Nobody expected us to beat Hockey Wolf. We lost 4-3. I scored 2 goals, 2 of our 3 goals. We lost by 1 goal. And you know what happened late in the second period? One of our defensemen, in trying to throw the puck around the back of the net, threw it into our own net. He scored an own goal on us, Chad.
Is he going to get murdered in the streets like that Colombian soccer player?
He felt bad. He felt very bad. And he apologized profusely. But also, as a part of me, wanted him to keep feeling bad because that killed us. That killed us. We tied that game. We had the momentum. Going into overtime, I feel like we could have beat Hockey Wolf. But then I also feel like I definitely have injured my back playing hockey this season. And we would have had to start a 3-game series for the championship tomorrow night. And there's no way. I could barely walk yesterday. There's no way I would be in a position to start a 3-game series. So maybe it's all for the best is what I'm saying.
But the season's over now, correct?
Season's over until spring hockey begins.
Well, that's a shame.
In April.
That's a shame. Can we talk about how you posted the team photo on Instagram that revealed that your hockey team is you and our friend Sam Keen and then a bunch of extremely elderly people?
We have the oldest team in that league. Yeah, by far.
So every time you hear Wayne Gretzky over here bragging about how many goals he scored and how he's top of the table in overall points, just remember, it's him and a bunch of super old people.
First of all, I led the other league. That's just the novice overall league.
Now we're splitting hairs.
In this league, this is a 35 and up league, and
it looks like a 70 and up league.
We have
you see the picture,
the oldest team, which is also why we were not that good.
Okay,
because some of those dudes are actually 100 years old, and trying to get them to get a little giddy up to go after a loose puck, it ain't gonna happen.
I'm just saying, when he's talking about his exploits, just imagine him skating.
The other teams, though, are of
Gert and Cornelius, and like, slipping one by Herb, the goalie.
Listen,
who's got to go back to the home as soon as the game's over.
You don't know shit about Herb. All right, the other teams are like around the same age. They're not all as old as my team. They were, I'd be killing those motherfuckers out there.
They got to get skates for their walkers.
Okay. Lee Spriggs says, I've been thinking a lot about fighters moving up in weight and making some fun. Which of these gets you going more? Holloway challenging Khabib, or my number one choice for hilarity, Yoel Romero moving up and challenging John Jones. I can't even imagine what that latter fight looks like, but I still want to see it. Also, which of those would be more competitive? Every time I am called upon to think about Yoel Romero at light heavyweight, I enjoy it so much. I just enjoy the possibilities. And honestly, I'm not saying Yoel Romero goes out there and beats John Jones, but man, that is an interesting puzzle that I would like to see. Like, I'd like to see how it would unfold. I think, John Jones obviously is going to have a lot of reach and a lot of range on Yoel Romero, but Yoel Romero, his wrestling ability, and B, his ability to, at any moment in a fight, just freak out in a sudden spasm of unpredictable violence and turn everything around all at once. That is interesting to me. That's an interesting wild card that I would like to see, especially now that John Jones has beat the shit out of basically everybody else at light heavyweight.
And not to mention the old saw about 205. We will take whoever we can get up there at light heavyweight. And Yoel Romero would certainly not be the least interesting addition to that weight class. And frankly, if you told me that Yoel Romero was going to host a show on PBS where he painted a picture every hour and you got to watch him paint the picture, I would watch that. I would watch any damn thing Yoel Romero wants to do. Half to see what his fashion choices were, and the other half would be to see the sudden explosion of violence and when it would occur. So whatever damn thing Yoel Romero wants to do, send me location. And I will watch it. I will gladly pay some money to watch it. And frankly, I talked about John Jones moving up to heavyweight and how many, basically you start throwing matchups at the wall, heavyweight matchups at the wall for John Jones, and every damn one of them sounds like just a treat for the eyes. It's the same thing is true about Yoel Romero at light heavyweight.
Carnival for the senses.
Yeah. Think of a light heavyweight fighter.
Okay.
Who is it?
Alexander Gustafsson.
Versus Yoel Romero.
Would watch.
# would watch. The more competitive thing is probably Holloway against Khabib. I mean, Khabib probably matches up pretty well against Max Holloway.
I think he does.
But people who know more about the technical aspect of mixed martial arts than I do think that Holloway is real special. That he is maybe the best pound for pound fighter in the world, maybe kind of a once in a generation talent. And so I'm interested to see how he will do at 155. And now that we know that he's going to go up there at least temporarily.
Jesse Laurenti asks, what are your thoughts on the rumor of a potential Diego Sanchez versus Demian Maia matchup? I didn't even know that was a rumor.
I think Demian Maia was talking about it on Twitter, right? That he would enjoy a fight against Diego Sanchez. I mean, it's a fun matchup of styles.
Especially now that Diego Sanchez is back to wrestling Diego Sanchez.
Yeah, I mean,
Demian Maia will be like, oh no, I hope I don't leave my leg out here and get taken down.
Yeah, I hope that you do not revert to your natural instincts and take me to the ground. But Demian Maia would be a guy Diego Sanchez would probably want to fight on the feet, though, right? So who knows what would happen there, but I'm into it.
Yeah, especially because it feels like a fight where nothing too terrible is going to happen to either one of them. And that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
For both those guys at this point.
There's a high level of, I'll put safety Safety in quotes.
Andrew Millington says Ian McShane would have been a great Tywin Lannister.
I agree. Somebody dropped the ball in casting. Not
features are too dark though for Lannister.
True.
You need a fair-haired,
But there's a part out there. There's a bigger role out there in Game of Thrones for Ian McShane that we didn't get to see.
Eric Sebastian says, do you ever see a future where there are rule changes in MMA to address brain trauma like the NFL is implementing? Anything from no knees to the head to no punchy face at all? I still think we do not know exactly what we're dealing with in terms of what the long-term damage is. Because you think about like the first generation of real MMA fighters, it's guys like Randy Couture and Mark Coleman. And, Mark Coleman has some health issues. They see, and I think that this is going to be more common than we think. It's a lot of joint stuff, like he had to have like hip replacement and stuff like that. Like he's not doing great, but it's not just because of the brain trauma thing. So they're still not that old though. Like they're in their 50s. Like we need, I think, a little more time to go by before we'll really see what the fighters of today will be looking at in terms of long-term damage. Yeah. But there's going to be some brain stuff. That's going to be part of it.
There obviously is. I mean, we've seen, some of those fighters have those issues already. There are sometimes fighters that come from a striking-oriented background, though, like Gary Goodridge is definitely starting to have, brain-related issues. I mean, what you can do to mitigate it is it's a combat sport, right? Like we're all already dealing in a thing where fighting is the point of the endeavor. And so can you do things to mitigate brain injury? Probably. Can you do enough? Can you totally get it off the board? Probably not, unless you alter the sport in its entirety. And most of the brain injuries are probably not occurring in the fights. Most of the brain injuries are probably accruing from long-term protracted thuds to the head in practice and training. And even in the NFL where they're trying to make rule changes and stuff, it's still almost like cosmetic because all of the rule changes in the NFL that I'm aware of that are supposedly designed to mitigate head trauma are just trying to protect the skill position players, right? You're trying to protect quarterbacks. You're trying to protect wide receivers. You are, to a certain lesser extent, trying to protect defensive backs from themselves. But nobody is even talking about linemen.
No,
there's no proposed rule changes for offensive and defensive linemen who are the guys who are suffering the most brain trauma in the NFL, because
the first thing they do every play is
every single play they're knocking their heads together against each other, and there's no effort whatsoever to mitigate that. And what could you even do to try to stop it?
That's why I think I don't know how much you're going to be able to do with MMA to stop people from ending up at the end of the long road broken in some way. That's why I think it's important to focus on who's going to care for that person. What responsibility does the promoter have to put aside some of the money, the mountains and mountains of money that they were making off this sport, to put aside some of that to care for the people in old age? Like the way, the NFL collective bargaining agreements go is each new one gets more and more weighted towards that, how long you can stay on the insurance, how long you have to be on a roster in order to qualify for it, what the pension is afterwards. That's where I think that a fighters association could really help them, is to negotiate something so that they have something laid by for them in their older years, because it's going to be bad for a lot of those people. Did you read that Wright Thompson story about going to the NFL Combine?
Mm-hmm. I did.
And he talked, it's really good. If you haven't read it, it's on ESPN.com. Wright Thompson wrote a thing about going to the NFL Combine and just how stupid the NFL Combine is largely. But he kind of talks about, being aware of this trade-off that these people are making and, signing up, dying to make in order to play in the NFL. And then at the same time, seeing some of the older players there, like he says at one point, I saw Earl Campbell in a wheelchair. And you're like, yeah, that is kind of a stark reminder of what we're really doing here. And I don't know how much you could take that away from it. William Howard says, in the barren wasteland that is a light heavyweight division, Dominic Reyes looks like an exciting prospect. Will an emphatic win against No Time lead to a title shot? I think it's premature, but there aren't a plethora of other options on the horizon. See, that's kind of what I think about like Dominic Reyes is similar to what I think about Johnny Walker. The kind of the worst thing you can do is string together a few wins that are too emphatic too soon, especially right now when John Jones is on the prowl,
right?
When he's just like hunting for victims, and you don't want to put your hand up too soon before you're ready, because it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and it's possible that John Jones's new declaration that he wants to stay busy and fight a bunch of people at light heavyweight is a little bit more cunning than we think it is. Because if you look around that division, you could make the case that there are several people in that division that you should fight right now if you're John Jones.
Yeah.
You should fight them as soon as possible before they get any better.
Mm-hmm.
And like Dominic Reyes is probably one of those. I think this fight against the Secret of the Ooze, that's who he's fighting, right?
Yep.
Is a big one for him. Obviously, it's kind of like a litmus test, a gatekeeper fight if he wins it. And if he wins it emphatically, I believe is the word that was used. Like clearly he graduates to like another level of light heavyweight contender. And the division is so shallow that like there's just not that much room to bring guys along that slowly. So if you're a person who's out here making waves like Dominic Reyes or like Johnny Walker, chances are you're going to find yourself in a fight against John Jones sooner than later, especially if John Jones is out here asking for it, which is a good strategy on his part. My cat just showed up.
What does this cat want from us?
She wants me to put her upstairs, I think is what's going to happen. Come here, you big fatty.
Let's see what else we got here.
There
Aaron
she
Dane
is.
says,
"Look at this magnificent beast." Be right back.
Just getting manhandled.
It's the live chat. This is what happens. Sometimes these things happen on the live chat.
Aaron Dane says, "Old Man in the Sea." Yeah, I got one of those. I got one of those sitting around here in one of my document files, almost done. I just keep forgetting about it. But yeah, I can go ahead and whip that into shape, post it up here pretty soon. This in the next installment of The Old Man in the Sea, we seek out help from a mysterious friend.
A mysterious friend?
Yeah. A new character is going to enter the stage. And
that's quite the tease.
We're going to have some fun with it.
It makes me feel thirsty to read the next installment of The Old Man in the Sea.
Chuck Turtleman says, "Just buried my mom yesterday. Didn't expect to cry listening to the CME today, especially about Big Bird." Well, damn, Chuck. We're sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's too bad, man.
Yeah, that's rough. But yeah, the Big Bird thing made me cry even independent of any other things going on.
You know, after this is over, we're going to record Road Agents where we talk about the end of the first season of Deadwood. I was feeling a little emotional at the end of the first season of Deadwood. Like there's some moments of unexpected grace at the end of the first season where I was just like I had to collect myself a little bit. I was feeling like Al Swearingen when he sees the Reverend in the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's some acting. Al Swearingen, me and McShane doing some motherfucking acting in that scene right there. Do you feel like it is easier for something weird to make you cry now that you are a parent?
Oh yeah, big time.
I don't know why that is. I don't know. I don't know how it happened, but I think that's a real thing. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I also feel like, and I think I've mentioned this maybe at some point before, like watching or like consuming any kind of like media or podcasts or true crime stuff where it's like bad stuff happens to children. I kind of just can't anymore. Like I just kind of can't. It's uncomfortable for me to the point where like I can't focus on what the thing is. Like my wife was watching like Abducted in Plain Sight, that thing with like and it's like a child sex abuse thing, and I sat down to watch a few minutes of it with her, and I was just like, nope, can't do this one.
Yeah, I find that I'm like a lot more affected by portrayals of violence in general, which is like a weird realization for myself because I used to consume a lot of it,
and
I still do.
Talk about fight sports,
right? Yeah. Well, and like for some reason that doesn't bother me quite as much, but like dramatized, I'm way less liable to watch a super violent movie or show now for whatever reason. Like I still will. We're watching motherfucking Deadwood for God's sakes, and I love it.
The body count really jumps up in the last couple episodes.
But like, yeah, you really have to earn it. I think for me at this point, I'm not just gonna watch, Hostel or whatever. Not that I ever would, but like, if you're gonna have some violence in your show, like you better be giving me something else. you better earn that violence, which Deadwood does, I will say.
Yeah. Jill Giorgio asked, did you ever figure out the Nogueira brothers skeleton story?
No.
Did you try?
I looked on the internet. It's really hard to
Google. Just like Googling Nogueira brothers skeleton story?
Yeah. Google Nogueira brothers skeleton,
Nogueira
childhood
brothers?
roof, all kinds of combinations. I couldn't find it. I'm pretty sure that I read it in a book somewhere, like one of those early MMA books, but I can't remember it. So if only I, had connections to like Brazilian media who might
maybe
be
I
able
could
to
ask Fernanda.
find out about it.
You can ask Fernanda Pratis and see if she knows anything about it. Let's see. Matthew Thomas says, would you guys ever consider doing a special 420 episode of the CME? I know one of you is down. Yeah. I know. I think it would end up just being super stupid.
I know one of us would end up being super stupid. The
Matthew,
other one would use words like milieu.
Matthew Thomas asks, just wondering what made you guys decide to move to the Patreon model. Did you think you'd have as much success with this model as you have? I'm sure you never started this podcast with any intentions of actually making money off it. It seems like you guys have done it the right way, and I really feel like I'm getting value in terms of how much content I'm getting for my patronage. It's a win-win if it means you guys can create more content for your audience of faithful shit-eating wild men, as well as people who don't even watch the sport, but still listen to the podcast for some reason. Yeah. I've been pleasantly surprised with how well the Patreon thing has worked out for us. And it makes it so that I feel like I can justify spending more time on podcast-related endeavors like this, because it feels more like a job. And it also makes it so that, like, especially when you work for like a big company and like working for like big media companies, and there's so much stuff where you're like, well, I would do this differently, but I don't get to make any of these decisions, and somebody else does, even if I think that affects the end product in a negative way. And it's really nice to have something that is just ours, and that we can do whatever we want with it. If we come up with an idea, if we decide it's a stupid idea, like whatever we can think of and realistically implement, we can actually do it. And that, to have, like, it feels like a way more of a genuine like connection with like our audience. Like, it feels like a thing that we're kind of all doing together.
Yeah.
Way more than when you're just like, showing up, working at a job, you do what you can and control what you can, and then you kind of have to let the rest go.
Yeah. My suspicion is, I think I said this once before, but like my suspicion is that the future of media in general, like sports media in general, and like in specific, the future of like combat sports or MMA super niche media might be stuff like this, like really small, independently produced efforts that are, whatever they are, and that people want to watch them for whatever reason people want to watch them. I still can't really figure that part out. But where we make like a really small amount of money, but it's enough for, two people to get by. And so the Patreon was essentially your idea. Like, you set it up. It's the first damn thing in 7 years that you've taken ownership of in the podcast. So that's nice. And it's gone like it's gone off like gangbusters, right? Like, way more successful than we possibly could have imagined or like frankly deserve to this point. And so that's wonderful. And like, especially since I just got laid off from my big, I just got laid off by big media.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to have a little bit of income coming in. And it's a thing that, like, I think we both legitimately enjoy doing. And so that makes it super worthwhile doing. And like right now we're at like a kind of a weird place with the Patreon, where like we're providing a fair amount of content and we're earning like a decent amount of money, but it's like we're right at this precipice where it was like, well, if we earned more, we could probably justify doing this as a full-time job.
Right.
But right now we're kind of at like the carrying capacity of content that we can provide for the money that's coming in right now. But we're pretty close to like having a thing where if we went over the top of it, like we could just be sitting here all the time. This could be like one of those porn houses where you pay money, like a voyeur house, and there's just cameras up all over the place.
I was falling asleep. I heard porn house.
That
I woke up. Yeah.
But you playing.
Just get all kinds of weird toys and implements in here. Don't even know what half of them do. Yeah, I'm into it. This is a fun one from Ryan Ellery. Saw an interesting post on Reddit MMA. favorite MMA conspiracy theories. You lads got any? Okay.
Oh.
I should clarify, like there's the MMA conspiracy theories that you hear where you're like, this one I don't think is real, but it's fun and like fun to think about. And then there's the others that the ones that I guess where I think that maybe there was some conspiracy, they usually tend to be like boring stuff. Like stuff about kind of like backroom dealing kind of stuff. Are you looking up MMA conspiracy?
Well, I was trying to think.
The Reddit thread.
Wasn't my first post for Cage Potato top 10 MMA conspiracy theories?
I don't know.
I mean, you're talking about a long time ago now. It's not like I'm going to remember. So I was trying to see if I could find that on the internet, but I can't. I can't find it on the internet. It's buried in the same ditch with the Nogueira Brothers skeleton story.
Do you have any off the top of your head?
Well, I cut you off. You were about to say one.
I was about to say one. What was it? Oh, wait. Okay, here. I found the Reddit thread. Noah is Henry Cejudo. That's a fun conspiracy theory. The Ali Abdelaziz Noah. Oh. Where's Noah? Yeah. Here's Yoel Romero has a twin brother, Joel Romero. Yoel does the media, weight cuts, and USADA test. Joel takes steroids and fights. Kind of like The Prestige. No, that's a fun one.
I mean, I've got one that I don't think it's true, but I think it'll make you think.
Okay.
So Mark Coleman won the Pride 2000 open weight Grand Prix.
Yes.
Was it fixed?
The open weight Grand Prix?
Because remember what happened to Mark Coleman.
Yeah. Well, okay. The fight against Takada that he lost was definitely fixed.
Yeah. He did the JOB there.
Yes.
He did business for Pride. So Mark Coleman departs the UFC in early 1999 on the heels of 3 straight losses. He shows up in Pride in April of 99, and he loses this obviously worked match in 1 minute and 44 seconds to Nobuhiko Takada via heel hook. A heel hook so shitty that even Boss Rutan on the commentary was, as it was happening, was like, I don't understand how that happened. Well, and he's not doing it right.
And I did a story about Pride like a couple of years ago, kind of on the anniversary of Pride's last show. And I talked to both Boss Rutan and Steven Quadros, and they were like, they were not calling that one live. They called that one on the tape, and everybody knew what was going to happen. Like somebody had sent like a fax or something to some gym in the United States that basically explained like, here's what's supposed to happen in this fight. And maybe it was that they were trying to get somebody else to do it, and then they wouldn't do it. And then so Mark Coleman had to do it. But by then, everybody knew it was going to happen. And Boss Rutan was saying that, they'd go around with a camera like backstage at Pride and be like, hey, what do you think is going to happen in this fight, get people to make their predictions. And I don't know if it was Boss himself or somebody else, but Boss was like, that somebody answered, I think Takada's going to win via heel hook at 1 minute 46 seconds, just like naming exactly what was going to happen. And everybody kind of being like, okay, the word is out on this one. So like when he called it, and Steven Quadros told me that when they sat down to do the commentary on that one, they were looking at each other like, how do we want to play this? And then deciding like, let's just call it like it's real. Let's call it like it's just a regular fight, and we'll express the appropriate amount of bafflement at what we see.
So Mark Coleman comes over to Japan. He does the JOB for Takada, the boss man at the time. What does he get for it?
Contract. He gets a deal with Pride where he gets to be in the Grand Prix.
What else?
You're saying they told him you're going to win the Grand Prix.
Is it possible that what Mark Coleman got was an advantageous bracket?
Okay.
In the Pride heavyweight Grand Prix. Because remember who he fights. He beats Ricardo Moraes as part of a non-tournament fight in November of 99. Gets off the schneid. Comes into the Pride Grand Prix 2000 Openweight Grand Prix. First round opponent, Masaki Satake.
Okay.
Current MMA record, 1-8-1.
All right.
He beats him via neck crank in 1 minute and 14 seconds. So he moves on to the finals, which all happened on May 1st of 2000. His second round fight is against Akira Shoji.
Okay.
Who's a small man.
Yes.
Not
really a heavyweight.
Then you'll recall his semifinal fight is against Kazuyuki Fujita, but Fujita came in with a knee injury, and basically they started the fight, and his corner threw in the towel 2 seconds in.
Yeah.
So nothing happens. I don't even think there's contact in that fight. Coleman advances to the finals, where he gets himself into a legit fight against Igor Vovchanchin and wins via knees in 3 minutes and 9 seconds.
So you're saying that basically...
Is it possible, we're putting on our tinfoil hats, that as partial payment for doing the job to Takada, Coleman got an advantageous run to the finals of the Pride Grand Prix, at which point they were like, you're on your own?
Yeah, I don't even know if that qualifies as a conspiracy theory, because it seems like kind of obviously what probably happened there. But yeah, but it's not like that was something... The Pride was known to do that just for the people it wanted to see move on in tournaments. Like when they would put together those Grand Prix, they didn't do the thing that you usually do in a tournament where like, here's the brackets. They would just be like, here are the first round matchups. And then we're going to see who comes out of those first round matchups. And then we will announce the second round matchups. Like when they wanted to see Vanderlei Silva, go deep into those tournaments, or they wanted to see Sakuraba advance or something, then that's how they would do it. So yeah, that's not too crazy. It's also, though, I don't know if this counts as a conspiracy theory either, but when Dan Henderson hurt his knee, had to pull out of that John Jones fight, Chael Sonnen stepped up. You got to think that Chael Sonnen might have known about that this opportunity would be coming maybe further in advance than John Jones did. He's boys with Dan Henderson. It makes sense that maybe that they would talk, like if Dan Henderson's saying, hey, I might have to pull out of this fight. Chael always is a guy with his ear to the ground and just what's going on in MMA in general. That one seems to me like maybe he had a little bit more time to prepare for that possibility, and it was sprung on John Jones at the last minute.
Yeah, it's possible. Who knows?
Well, that's something that, talking about Pride, that a lot of guys would say is like the way that they would maybe try to get the result they wanted was not necessarily by fixing the fights, but they would call you up and say, we want you to fight this guy in 2 weeks. Might be like, we want you to fight Krokop in 2 weeks. And you'd be like, no way, man, that's not enough time. And some people told me, like Dan Henderson, I think, told me that they basically told him, if you want to continue to do business with us, you need to take this fight on short notice. And he was kind of in a position where he felt like, all right, I guess I got to do it. And then Mark Coleman told me that he had been in positions where they would say, hey, we want you to fight this guy on short notice. And you'd say, no, I just can't do it. And they'd say, okay, how about for this amount of money? And then they would just keep going up until you couldn't say no anymore.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Wasn't there also like some whispers that the one of those early ultimate tournaments in the UFC, that there was some backstage hijinks? I think somebody claims that they were basically asked to like give somebody an easy fight so they could get to the finals. But I don't think it was like the UFC that was doing it. I think like there was a lesser known fighter and a better known fighter that both had the same manager, and the manager was kind of like, let's go out there and like make sure that this person gets to the finals after an easy fight.
Okay, if you want to hear my real conspiracy theories, then that's where I think there's at least the opportunity for some actual conspiracies to happen, is when you see that there aren't a ton of management options in MMA right now. Because as we've talked about before, the big time managers don't want to get involved in this sport. It's weird and there's money's not that great.
Yeah.
So
Scott Boras ain't getting out of bed for the amount of money that he would make off managing MMA fighters.
And so when you see like one manager who manages a whole bunch of different people and he's working with the UFC a whole lot, there are at least opportunities, let's say, for that guy to be talking with the UFC and to think like, all right, hey, how about if I get this guy who I manage to do something that may not be in his best interest, but will help you out. And in return, you will help me out with this other guy I manage. Like, I I feel confident that that probably has happened at some point in the past. So that is an actual conspiracy, I think. That, and like, it's the exact opposite. Like, if you don't want to think that your manager would be trying to cut deals for somebody else he's supposed to be representing your interests, but I'm sure that is not always the case, just because of the way the landscape is.
In general, though,
and because a lot of times if you become a fight manager, it's not because you saw a field where an honest person could prosper.
In general, though, I would say that like the MMA landscape is far more willing to believe conspiracies than than what the actual reality reflects.
Yes.
Like there's a lot.
We're always looking for a conspiracy.
Yeah. For whatever reason, people who are super into MMA like are willing to believe a lot of
fighters are willing to believe a lot of fringe views.
Yeah.
Just in general. All right. We're a little over an hour in. Anything else you want to talk about or that we should try to hit here?
Goes in for the handshake, slaps the phone out of the guy's hand. Street Dundasso. It works.
Okay, here's a last one from Alexandra Moffett. Do you also have the feeling that women's MMA has fallen in the background? It is not being as promoted as other fights.
Yeah.
Feels like maybe women's MMA right now is missing a star. Isn't that star quality that helps get it more attention? Ronda Rousey's gone. Cyborg got beat. Feels like we're kind of missing a lightning rod of a personality.
Yeah. And like not great efforts at establishing a new one, I would say, by the promoter themselves. And like, especially right now, we're in a little bit of a lull. We just did Amanda Nunes versus Cyborg Justino. So like essentially it was a champion versus champion fight. So essentially you took two women's weight classes off the board for a little while because both those fighters have to recuperate. And now Nunes obviously is the champ, at least for the time being. So you got both bantamweight and featherweight kind of in a holding pattern until we figure out what's going on with that. And so there just hasn't been a ton of high profile women's MMA like fight announcements or news happening recently. They just announced Shevchenko against Jessica Ai, right? That's the women's flyweight title, which is probably going to be a pretty good fight, but at the same time doesn't have a lot of like high profile sizzle, at least in my opinion. And you've got Rose Namajunas, who's been kind of, not necessarily right out in the forefront of things since she won the title. So you are experiencing like a bit of a lull, I guess, in terms of publicity and big things happening. And at the same time, like, I don't think we should forget that the guy who runs the company was essentially like, we're never doing women's fighting in the UFC until the singular personality of Ronda Rousey came along and then like basically changed his mind. And then for a while, women's MMA was the biggest thing going in the UFC. And now she's gone. So it's like, is there a lot of enthusiasm there from the top down to like promote big women's MMA fights and find that next star?
Yeah, we're just going to let Invicta figure it out for us. That's what the UFC is going to do. Let Invicta find out if there's a star out there, and then we'll just take them.
Solid.
Easy.
Good work if you can get it.
Sunny Weather says, pause to watch the Big Bird learned about death, also cried. So I'm telling you, you look that clip up, but old me cries a lot. I used to be a crazy shit-eating wild man. Now I can't listen to certain songs without breaking down. Can't even think about That's What Friends Are For. The song That's What Friends Are For.
Just a bunch of old softies getting together to chat on the internet on a Wednesday morning.
William Howard says, can't watch Disney movies now without crying. Father of a 2-year-old.
Is that just because you had to watch them so much, though?
Yeah.
One more time through Moana.
Sears off the nerve endings for all the Disney movies.
Soon those are all going to be on the Disney streaming thing. You're not going to be able to watch them anymore. Unless
got a bunch of the DVDs, man.
Ben Foltz does have a tremendous DVD collection.
Whenever my wife's parents want to send us a Christmas gift or something, it's just DVDs coming in all the time. We got them. All right. I'm going to wrap this thing up.
Don't forget to send us your shipping addresses by Friday, or else you're not getting a koozie and a sticker. Somebody wrote in this week to specifically tell us, don't send me that stuff.
Okay.
He's like, I love you guys. I want to support you. Don't send me any more trash that I'll just be sitting around at my house.
Done.
And I was like, I hear you, brother. And I respect it.
That is one request that we can definitely fulfill.
Yep.
Yeah.
Friday deadline. I guess we're done here now, though. We're going to go ahead and record Road Agents, wrapping up the first season of Deadwood. I'm excited about it.
I'm excited too.
Bye now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm going to stop going live on the internet.